Okay, so today we're diving into something pretty amazing. We're talking about architecture, but not just like buildings, right?
No, not at all. This is about architecture that doesn't just house us, it like reconnects us back to ourselves, to nature.
Exactly. And the person we're exploring is Leon Krykhtin.
And he's doing some really fascinating work. I mean, the guy's not just an architect. He's like an artist who sees how intertwined the built environment is with, how we live, how we work, how we feel.
Totally. And what's so cool is we've got excerpts from an interview with Krykhtin himself, plus we're going deep into his website, all this amazing stuff.
Yeah, and get this. We're talking parametric design, 3D modeling that's so detailed it makes like traditional drawings obsolete.
Wild, right. But then his biggest inspiration is nature. Kind of a cool contrast.
Totally. That's where it gets super interesting, this fusion of cutting-edge tech with these like timeless organic principles.
Right. One of the things Krykhtin talks about that really struck me is how buildings actually, like, they outlive their creators. They evolve over decades, revealing new facets. What does that even mean for a building to reveal new facets?
It's like he's designing for the future, not just the present, you know? Crichton thinks about how light and shadow will play on surfaces years later, how the building will age, how it'll weather. His background with Zaha Hadid Architects probably has a lot to do with this.
7 years in their VR research unit, that's not just dipping your toes into the tech.
Exactly. That's deep immersion. It shows a really profound understanding of form, of space, the ability to really visualize how a structure will exist in the real world before it's even built.
He uses this great analogy. He talks about his relationship with technology like a surfer riding a wave.
I like that.
It's about harnessing the power of what's possible, not just using gadgets, just because.
And you can see that in them, like the sheer range of his projects, architecture, urban planning, product design. He's even done some fashion.
No way.
Yeah. You can tell he's not afraid to push boundaries and experiment like across disciplines.
Which makes his focus on nature even more interesting, Speaking of pushing boundaries, we have to talk about Krychtin's forest project. What jumped out at you when you first, encountered this project?
Well, I mean, the name itself, Forest Project, it draws you in. It makes you think about, like, this immersive experience. But when you get into the details, that's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, it's like, we know it's about reconnecting us to nature, but how? And then the website mentions using Fienza bathroom products, minimalist fixtures, to actually heighten the experience. I'm so curious about that.
Right. It's like minimalist fixtures in a forest. How does that work? It's a really cool contrast. You've got this high-tech design process all inspired by, nature and its complexity, but then this element of refined simplicity. And you see that tension playing out in the visuals on his website. It's really cool.
So are we talking organic forms, natural materials? What's the visual language?
There are definitely hints of that. But it's not just about literally mimicking nature. I think it's more about capturing the essence of how being in nature, in those spaces, how it makes you feel. Remember, Krychtin talked about wanting people to feel fluidity, movement, and flow in his work.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's really at the heart of the Forest Project.
And that's where those sensory details he was talking about come in, right? Like the wind erosion patterns, the smell of trees. It's like he's thinking about engaging all the senses, not just what we see.
Yes, exactly. He's going for total sensory immersion. Think about how you feel just standing in a forest. The air on your skin, the sounds, the scents, right? He's trying to evoke that same feeling, but within, a built environment, which is a really fascinating challenge.
And that's what I'm wondering about with the whole Fienza thing. Minimalism, okay, but in a forest, how does that play into this whole sensory experience? It's by using these minimalist elements, these fixtures, it's actually amplifying those natural sensations you're talking about, creating a space where you can really, be present and appreciate those subtle things, those nuances of being in a forest.
Exactly. It's like stripping away all the distractions, all the unnecessary stuff, and just letting that, the natural world be the focus. And honestly, this idea of connection, it seems to be at the core of everything Krychtin does.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not just about connecting with nature, though, right?
Yeah.
It's also about connecting with ourselves. He talks about architecture that interacts with people, that makes us feel like we belong. It's pretty powerful stuff.
It really is. And it makes you think about his own journey, too, Ukraine to Russia, the UK, China. He seems drawn to new environments, new challenges.
Constantly pushing boundaries, yeah. It speaks to like this certain restlessness, a desire to explore different ways of seeing the world, experiencing things, which, I mean, brings us back to that phrase, fluidity, movement, and flow.
Hmm.
What do you think he's getting at with that? It's such an interesting way to describe like the goal of architecture.
Right. I think it speaks to like the experience he wants to create. It's not about like dictating how people should feel in a space, but about encouraging that movement, that exploration, that sense of interconnectedness he's always talking about.
Yeah, like providing a canvas basically for
Yeah.
people to have their own experiences. That's cool.
It is really cool. So, as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into Leon Krykhtin's work, it feels like, we might have more questions than answers in some ways, but maybe that's the point.
Maybe, yeah.
He's making us rethink our whole relationship with buildings, with the spaces we create and inhabit. And, like, can architecture actually help us connect, not just with nature, but with ourselves, with each other? I don't know. It's a lot to think about.
It is. He's pushing the boundaries of what architecture can be, that's for sure. And I think that's a really exciting thing.
It totally is. And for everyone listening, here's something to kind of chew on. If you could design a space that made you feel a certain way, what would it be? And how would you use architecture, light, natural elements, all of it to make that feeling real? Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious. Hey everyone, and welcome. If you're curious about how AI is shaking things up in the creative world, especially architecture, you're in the right place. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the work of Leon Krykhtin.
Oh, yeah. I've been following his work for a while now. Really interesting stuff.
Right. He's not just an architect. This guy is deep into AI. Founded LKDN Studio, an innovative design firm, and get this, he also started Origin AI School.
So it's all about giving creatives the power of AI tools, right?
Exactly. It's like he's on a mission to, totally revolutionize the design world from the ground up.
I like that, democratizing AI in design. It's not just about making cool images, though, right?
Definitely not.
It's about changing how we approach design, empowering a new generation to think differently.
And LKDN Studio, they're not all talk. They've got these amazing masterclasses, everything from AI and automotive design, even AI and filmmaking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they've managed to condense these super complex tools and techniques into 3 weekend courses.
3 weekends. That's incredible.
Wait.
It really shows how quickly things are changing with AI. Krykhtin's definitely on top of that, helping others keep up with the pace.
Absolutely. It's a total game changer for anyone who wants to break into design. But here's the thing. This passion for making AI accessible, it's not just a side project for Krykhtin. It's baked into his architectural work, too.
So we're going to see how he's putting these ideas into action in his building design.
Exactly. Let's jump into that. It's one thing to teach this stuff, but to actually use it to create real-world buildings.
Yeah.
That's next level.
I'm excited to see where he goes with it.
So yeah, we talked about LKDN Studio and Origin AI School, but there's this YouTube video, right, where Krykhtin digs into his whole architectural philosophy.
Okay.
And it's really interesting stuff. He's all about architecture that makes a real difference in people's lives.
Interesting. Because, sometimes architecture gets caught up in just like the look, the aesthetics, but it sounds like he's thinking about the human impact, how it makes people feel, how they live in those spaces. I'm curious to see how that actually plays out.
Yeah, and he uses this analogy. It's actually kind of cool. He compares his design philosophy to being a surfer, always evolving, adapting, staying ahead of the wave. And I think it makes sense, especially coming from someone who was at Zaha Hadid Architects.
Oh, right.
Talk about pushing the boundaries. They were doing parametric design using algorithms to create those really cool, flowing, futuristic buildings.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, knowing he comes from that background, it gives you a new perspective on his work.
Yeah.
They were all about using new technology, pushing the limits of what architecture could be. Sounds like he's still doing that.
Totally, yeah. And speaking of pushing boundaries, we have to talk about the Nanjing Youth Cultural Center. That project in China, it was massive. I mean, huge in scale.
Yeah, and really complex.
Small complex.
And what I find fascinating about that project is that they used virtual modeling, extensively.
Oh, wow.
They basically built a digital twin so detailed that they could fabricate parts directly from the model. It's amazing.
That's incredible. So precise.
Yeah, it just shows you the power of these tools.
Yeah, it really does.
Not just for efficiency, but for the kind of designs you can create.
Right. It makes you wonder what the limits even are anymore.